Right. So what happened in I had recorded a bunch of stuff here, and the mic audio was really, really bad. I had it in like my headphones versus my microphone. So what I'm going to do is just kind of do my best to explain this. Hopefully, there's no issues. There shouldn't be. But what we're doing is creating a waypoint system, which are these little dots here, to get our. And then in the next lesson, we'll actually have our ship fly along this path, like out of the scene. So we're kind of working on enemy movement, is really what we're doing. So I'm going to sort of walk you through each each thing I did in this video, which is a little bit longer. It was a 15-minute video, so hopefully I don't miss anything. Let me know if you run into any issues. So the first thing we're going to do is create this waypoint system or this waypoint path. And we might have multiple of these paths. So I'm going to actually hide the one that I made already by just clicking off this inactive button here. And I'm going to right click in here. I'm going to create an empty game object, and I'm just going to call this WP space and then parentheses 0. And this indicates waypoint path. Okay. I guess we could call it waypoint WPP, waypoint path. And then I want to make sure that I zero this out in my world. And what I'd like to do underneath this waypoint path is create the little points that my ship will follow along. So let's go ahead and right click on here and then go to create empty, and it should make it a child. And I'm just going to call this WP space. This indicates a waypoint 0. And it should be at the center of the world. And I'm going to position it outside of the camera here. So it's just outside of here. Now we don't see it in our scene. So up here on this little Unity icon, I'm going to click on that, and you can create an icon. You can pick any icon that you see that kind of stands out. The pink seems to stand out against that green. If you don't see it, you could have gizmos turned off. Let me kind of really expand this, which is this right here. And we did do that. I think we turned it off in the last tutorial, or we clicked on this, and we have 3D icons, so we made them really small. So you could at first just make them really big if you need to see them, and then adjust them later. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a few more. So I'm going to hit Control D, and you could see when we created that parentheses, it automatically named it 1. And then I'm just going to have it like fly in the scene here, hit Control D, fly up here, Control D again, fly down here, Control D one more time, and just have it fly off the shot. You could have it a little bit more interesting because remember, they're going to be eventually shooting at you. So you don't want them to clouder up the whole space. You can keep it a little higher. And then you can just click this whole waypoint system and shift them around or move them, or just select all of them this way and move them up a little bit. So this ship here, this little guy here, our enemy player ship, will start off scene here and then just fly like this when we code it. All right, so now we have a path for our ship to fly on. And this is really just the first step. You'll eventually build this with a nav mesh if you're doing 3D or things like that. So this is kind of the first step in you guys learning some good AI, is a waypoint system. All right, so here we are. We have our waypoint path. The next thing we need to do is in our scripts folder here, we're going to create a waypoint underscore scriptable object script. So go ahead and right click, create a new model behavior script, and then name it waypoint underscore scriptable object. Now with that open, which I have it open here, we're going to go through the lines of code. First things first is we need this using systems collections.generic. That's going to allow us to use our list, which are our data structures. We've done lists before, but I'm going to explain them in detail anyway. I want you to go ahead and you could pause the video and type this first line, and then I'll explain it. So this is a really, really awesome feature because what we're doing, as a technical artist myself, I do a lot of create asset menu stuff where I'll write editor tools for other artists to use. Like I'm creating a character customization or character setup system now. And in order to get this menu to appear inside of our scene, so like, for example, I want to create an asset menu, and the menu's name is waypoint config, and the file name is new waypoint config. I can actually right click in here now into the scriptable objects folder, and I can go to create, and you can see I have a waypoint config down at the bottom here. And when I click on it, it creates a new file called new WP config. So this is really cool for anybody who's interested in being a technical artist. That's an artist who can also script, which I think all of you are really getting primed for anyway when you take my classes. The next is these two fields here, which shouldn't be too hard to understand. we have a private transform. And remember, what is a transform? It's a variable. When we use the word transform, is we're saying that this variable here can store this information. So all this right now, we have a serialized field with private transform wave path. Now, if I go to this object here, I'm going to leave this open. What it's doing is I name it waypoint path because I want this waypoint path. I'm going to go ahead and turn this one off and just turn the other one back on because I already created it. Oh, sorry. This is really important. So public class waypoint scriptable object, I renamed it from model behavior to scriptable object. So a scriptable object is, you could think of it as like a variable or data container. But what's really amazing about it is it allows you to store or manage large amounts of data independently from the game objects in their scene. And this thing lives, this scriptable object, it can live outside of any level. So I can always refer back to this script or the scriptable object script during any level to pull that information. So for this, what's nice is I'm going to have waypoints through every level of my game where my ships are flying around. So I could always refer back to this script without having to have it in the scene. So this is really, really great. I love using scriptable objects or storing data like player stats, enemy properties, and level design details. So just overall, just think of it as a data container. We're going to be using them a lot. You've used them before when we made the quiz game. So what are we storing? Well, if we look at these first 2 lines of code here, again, we're storing the path inside of here. And you can see it's here. And then I want to have like a move speed here for how fast my enemies move along this path. Okay. Next thing is we made a variable called public transform. It's get starting waypoint. Now you might guess what this does. It's getting the starting waypoint, which is the first one here. I'm going to delete this new one that we made. You can keep yours because it's probably your first time making it. I'm assuming so. So here's our first waypoint. So how are we getting that starting waypoint? Let me zoom in a little bit. We made it of type transform. Remember, we're going to get the transform that's on this first waypoint. And what this does is when I call this method, it's going to return waypoint path, which is up here. It's going to say, hey, what do you want to get? Well, I want to get the child located at index 0. If you remember when we talked about data structures before, there's an index number. So we don't start saying this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The index number is 0. It always starts at 0. So when I say return waypoint get child 0, we're actually getting this one here because it's at index 0. It's the first child of our waypoint path, which is stored up here. Okay, cool. So now that we have this stored, right, we can get that first child. How can we go through this and loop through all of these so we can find each transform of each one of those and say, hey, I want my transform here to match this one. And then I want my next transform to match this one so I can move along this path here and then fly out of the scene, right? Well, the way that we can do that is create another method and it just gets all of our waypoints. Now, the thing that you have to understand is we're not actually moving our ship yet. All we're doing in this variable here is we're just getting those waypoints. We're not assigning it to the ship yet. So how do we do that? Well, we're just making a list. Now, remember, a list is, I always like to start with the idea of a variable. A variable is a cup. You could think of a list as a cabinet. And inside of the cabinet, I can create new drawers at will, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to create a drawer or a cabinet, and it's called list, and it can store a bunch of different transforms. And the name of my cabinet is waypoints. And I'm just saying here, I'm making a new one. So I'm just making a new cabinet. So this is a for each loop. We've used them before, but let me go through them again. So we have this list here called waypoints. We haven't done anything yet. So what I'm going to do inside of my for each loop is I'm going to make a new variable called child, and it's of type transform, which means this variable can store transforms. Well, when we go through a for each loop, this only runs once. So what we're going to say is in WP path, which is this guy here, I'm going to, as I'm going through every element in WP path, so for each child in waypoint path, I'm going to add that child. So what happens is when I run this loop, it says, okay, so as it's going through our WP path here, it's going to add what are each one of these children to this list. So all this list is doing is it's storing all of those in the WP path. And then we're going to return them. So when we call get waypoints, Here, we could use another variable, or we can call this itself, and we can cycle through all of these waypoints. The last thing we're going to do here is we just create a simple variable or method. It's called of type float here, and it returns move speed. That's all this does. So if I say, float move speed equals, and then we call this move speed method, all it's going to store right now is the number 5, this float value 5. So that's all this script does. So let's go ahead, and once you save that, double check for errors. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'll scroll slowly. You could kind of pause it. This is our whole script. So once you do that, go ahead and make a new folder inside of your scripts folder here called SO for scriptable object. Right click, go to create, and then inside of this waypoint config file, go ahead and make a new waypoint config file. Name it WP0 for waypoint 0 scriptable object. And then what you want to do is for your path name, you just want to drag in your waypoint path here. And what it's looking for, again, so it's this waypoint path. It has a single transform. Let's see. Oh, sorry. I tried restarting to record this demo again. So here's my original waypoint path, which has the pink ones. It doesn't matter. It's the same setup, but here's waypoint 0. I can drag this waypoint path inside of here. And if it doesn't drag in for some reason, you can actually go inside of here. And actually, you know what? You need to drag it in from your hierarchy. So inside of here, I made a new prefab a new folder called waypoints. And this should actually be in my prefabs folder. So waypoints. And with my scriptable object selected, I can actually drag it from here and I drop it in there. Sorry, I have to do it outside of the scene because my scriptable objects are referencing things inside here. So remember to drag this inside of your waypoints folder here to make a prefab. I'm not going to hit original prefab or variant, just like that. So hopefully that made sense. It's just this script here, this setup here, and then now you have a scriptable object here. And remember, if you don't see that coming up, remember you have to name your model behavior scriptable object.